Hello to everybody. I'm Chiara Bersani. I'm an Italian artist. It's so difficult to explain. I'm a choreographer and performer. I'm an activist. I'm a woman with a disability. I have a physical disability called osteogenesis imperfecta. I'm very small and with a very fragile body. Um, and okay, I have many things to tell to every one of you, but for now it's okay. So, Mara.
Hi everyone, hi Chiara, and thank you so much for this invitation. My name is Mara Pieri. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Coimbra. I come from the field of sociology, and in my work I focus mainly on disability and queerness in a broad sense, let's say, in an intersectional perspective. I am a chronically ill person, which means that I have an invisible disability, which is something that somehow links me to Chiara, but at the same time, expands what we mean by disability, and this is something we will probably discuss today. I identify as queer in the LGBTQ plus spectrum, and so through my work I also identify as an activist, because I try to to bridge the gap between activism and academia in what I do. I'm currently in my home in Portugal, but I'm from Italy, which is also something that links me to Chiara, and that's it. I'm very happy to be here.
It's clear that the English of Mara is better than mine. My English is very strange, very confused with Italian, and I hope it's accessible for everyone. But I'm sure that Mara helped me in some moment. Very important thing, I'm not in my home now. I'm in a hotel because that's the crazy summer that we are living now for artists. Is full of everything that we are trying to reschedule all the work that we lost during the winter. And so me and Mara, when we decided to make that conversation together, the first thing that we think it was that we need to talk about come stiamo.
How we are.
So, tell me, Mara, are you okay?
Well, in this moment of pandemic, I think that this is such a complex question. Like, we were probably used to answer, in the most lame and elementary way. But right now, answering to this question has become more and more difficult. I've been confined in my home due to my fragile body in the last year and a half. So for me, there was not a difference. There is no difference since the beginning of the pandemic. I've been staying at home, shielding, and working from home. So my crazy summer right now is working from home. I haven't seen my family since the beginning of the pandemic, and so my life shrinked in the space of my home, which is something that is radically different, I will say, from so many of you that are probably listening and what you are experiencing. And it is something that also was quite interesting that happened a few weeks ago when Chiara invited me to another talk in Italy, and Chiara was able to be there physically, and I was not able to be there physically, so I was there virtually. And so this junction between what we do with our body and what we do with our voice and our online presence is something that I'm feeling in every field of my life. Like I feel completely disembodied in the way I'm working, in the way I'm experiencing my relations and even my leisure. So that's how I am. And this is, of course, very interesting from an academic perspective, especially when we think about fragile bodies and who has access to what and what we can do in which spaces. But then when it comes to the personal reflections and experience is not that easy. So Chiara, how are you?
I think that now it's impossible to have a clear answer about that. Yesterday I was a premiere in Bolzano, and with my colleague and friend Marco D'Agostino, we are talking about an episodio, yeah. And with Marco talking with a curator, operator, artistic operator. I'm sorry, this ambulance, sorry. One day he talked to that person that he was very tired, but in that moment to tell I'm tired, for us it's a political thing, because we're tired because it's not safe, it's not sane, the moment and the type of work that we are living now. And when Marco told that the things to this person, the answer that he received, it was, oh wow, but why every artist have that moda,
that it's fashionable right now,
to tell always we are tired. Why? It's so beautiful that we are work now. We are so good. It's a so beautiful moment. And it was like a nightmare, because the people that told that is a part of a very big artistic foundation. And so it's the voice of the power. And when Marco, that is an independent artist, listened that answer, and immediately the conversation stopped, because it wasn't possible to tell nothing more, because it's like, okay, your position is not important. If you don't want work, it's your problem. I want work. Something like that. And it's like if in that it's very important, that episode, because it's like if in that moment it's not possible the dialogue. I can talk with you or with different people that is alliance or friend or colleague in the independent world, but every time, or activist, but every time that we try to talk with something that have the power, the real power now, something of strange happen. Someone tell you, yes, I understand that you are tired now. I understand that it's difficult to work with that schedule of work. In every day you are in a different city, every day you are in a different performance, in a different premiere, blah, blah, blah. With no many money, because I'm sorry, but understand, okay, I'm a big foundation, but also me, I live in the crisis, not only you, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So there is that type of answer. So I understand, but I can do nothing. And the other type of answer, like, what is the problem? Why you tell me that we are tired? It's today, since today, I think that I spend more time to think about that episode of Marco, and it's interesting and violent, also because during the really dark part of the pandemic, so the 2 winters that we live close in our home, for me, that I repeat, I'm a woman with disability. One of the things more difficult to accept, it was that, and maybe Mara can understand, it was that in a moment, in one day, all the things that with many difficult, I avevo conquistato.
I've achieved.
During the years, like the mobility, like to travel alone with the train, with the airplane, with go alone in a festival or in a new production. Okay. In a moment, everything was disappear. And for someone that have a so compromised disability, it's like if every day I have a little intimate fight, because every day I fear. Also, when the world is not crazy like now. So every day I fear. Every day when I take the train, I think, okay, how many things can to be wrong? Oh, it's so many that, okay, don't think of that. Stay calm, stay in the present, breathe. It's really like a training, a quotidian training. And in the moment that you are closing your home for a long time, and you feel that in your home, in reality, stay sure, stay safe, because it's true. Because for everyone, not only for people with disability, for everyone, if you stay in your home, not really, because there are many problems to stay in your home with difficult dynamic in family, and okay, we know. But if you stay in the home that you want, with the situation that you want, in a safe space, it's clear that you feel tu senti che sei sicuro e un po' hai voglia di adagiarti.
Yeah, you feel like you're safe, and this brings you somehow to, to lay down in this comfort, and you don't really want to go out from this comfortable situation.
And so when you are in the moment like now, that everything in Italy, not in all the Europe, but in Italy, everything is reopened, all the festival, all the theater, all the performative activities, and you feel that you must to go for the money, for your work, and also for a strange senso di colpa.
Yeah, guilt, a sense of guilt.
Sense of guilt, because you think, okay, for all the time that I was in my home, I think, oh, that is a nightmare. It's not possible that I lost my all the things that I discovered during the year, blah blah blah. And so you a part of your mind, of my mind, took me all the day. Go, Chiara. Go, don't think it's not a problem. Go, it's necessary that you go. Think of Mara that it's close on and her home. Go for everyone. Go. But the other part of me, no, because I'm not enjoy. I'm not enjoy. I'm not good now. I'm tired. I'm sad. I'm fear again because it's not safe the world also now. And am sure that I don't want to live and work in that way. And last thing, it's not now I started to talk about my body, because yeah, it's so extreme that in some way it's more simple to identify in that the political man. But that question is not only about the body with disability. For example, many colleagues, many dancers, after many months that don't dance because it wasn't possible, now in that rhythm of life, hanno molti incidenti.
Yeah, are experiencing a lot of injuries and breaking bones and stuff.
So it's something that it's about all the bodies, not only the fragile bodies. It's not
But
possible.
Chiara, I don't know if you experienced that, but at the very beginning, in the first part of the pandemics, I felt like finally the fragility of the disabled bodies was exposed, because it was somehow becoming universal. Like everybody was somehow experiencing what we experience on a daily basis, which is feeling fragile, feeling like our bodies need to have a different rhythm, and feeling like our home is our safe space, because it is meant to, it is made for our bodies and our needs. Whereas the space outside is always inaccessible, and it's always a struggle. And at the beginning, there was also this shift, which I enjoyed a lot. Like all of a sudden, a lot of cultural events, festivals, theaters, cinemas, everything was so accessible all of a sudden. Even those things that are always difficult for me to access, and not only for me, everything was suddenly accessible and made in such an easy way that made me think that, probably when we were fighting for accessibility before the pandemics, and they were telling us that accessibility was not possible, it was not possible to make a theater accessible, that was just, it was not taking in consideration our needs and our demands. And all of a sudden, when these needs and these demands became universal, then everything was easy, everything was made accessible. And in the first part of the pandemics, I experienced it. I felt like, wow, maybe we are going through a historical time in which finally people will understand what it means to live in a body that doesn't follow the rhythms of the normal world, of what is supposed to be normal. And also because all of a sudden the rhythms of work, they changed, they became very slow, and it was okay to feel not okay. It was okay just to stay at home. It was okay not to be productive. It was okay to be just quite reflexive and to think about our well-being. But that was just the first phase, because all of a sudden, when the opportunity to reopen spaces and commercial spaces and shops and stuff, when there was this opportunity, it was as if this divides between normal people and people who don't fit into that normalcy was even bigger, because it was as if there was a rush to go back, the thing that you were saying, a rush to go back and produce and do and and recuperate somehow everything that had been lost. And this is so perverse, because we cannot, if there is something that we can learn from the pandemics in being together in the pandemic, is the fact that we need to find different ways to accommodate our rhythms of work, our rhythms of life. It is not sustainable to work and produce in the way that it was before, because we are all fragile bodies. And that's why, I think that we should learn from disabled experiences, from the people that, like us, that live in a different time frame, in a different, rhythm. And it is very perverse in this moment, Chiara, that, you are somehow pushed back to this crazy timeline in which everything, it goes very fast, and your fragility is not considered, and it's as if our bodily fragility was an obstacle to be fully productive, and so to be fully, included. And it's such a shame, I think, that this happens in the academic environment, in the performative arts, because these are, amongst others, environments in which I think there should be some, reflection on this. But it seems to me that the rhythms that we are both living are not accessible to us. So when we think about accessibility, even within the performative space, we're not just talking about spaces, making spaces open and including. We are talking about also the way we want people to do things, and how much we are available and okay to, wait for the others. No?
Yeah. And now I listen to you. I'm thinking how many opportunity we have lost. Not because I think that the pandemic is full of opportunity. I hate the pandemic, and nothing of good can arrive from that. Okay, but it's happened, and people that live in the world, we can only find a way for to stay in that moment and wait. And so in that approach, I think that we have really lost a big opportunity, because during the more dark moment, when every one of us was fragile, the point it was that only people with disability or people with a very specific approach to the life talking about the thing that all the bodies are fragile, not only some bodies, and but are fragile in some way, in some similar way, because also the people with disability, also for the people with disability, was the first pandemic in the life. Not that me and Mara, wow, in our life make three pandemic wave. No, it's the first time also for us. So all the bodies was fragile and vulnerable.
Yeah, vulnerable.
Okay, vulnerable. Okay, during that moment. But for the time, the mainstream narrative talk about some type of bodies more fragile than other bodies. So all the people take care, not in a really way, take care in a superficial way. The other bodies, so the difference was it's enormous. It's a very big difference. It's like a ocean. In a moment that the reality, it's another. The reality is that we were so similar in the situation that we lived. And so now, the things that for me it's very problematic is that maybe if during the last winter, the last 2 winters, we like Occidental humanities started to change our approach to the bodies and to the powerful of the bodies. Maybe now it's possible to start to rebuild in another way. The problem is that thing is not happened. Or also, if many people talk for all the time, please, listeners, please, we are in the same situation, please stay close, talk, try to talk about that, but I think it's not happened. And so now we are involved in a situation that is not accessible, but for no one, not only for me, not only for Mara, for no one. I repeat, all my colleagues, and I work in the dance world, so my colleagues are athletic bodies and performative bodies and sane bodies, but also my colleagues are not good, are not well, are not in a good moment, are full of pain, but physical pain and not emotional, not only emotional pain, are full of physical pain. Because that timing, that schedule of life is not accessible for no one. And the same things is about around the idea of audience. It's true. During the first, in particular, in the first phase of the pandemic, many cultural projects and projects was accessible online. And for the first time, I think in my life, I'm sure the first time, some discussion, some panel about the idea of accessible also for people with sensorial disability or different type of attention okay. For the first time, that conversation that normally is very elitarian.
Elitist.
In that moment, for a time, it was more a little bit mainstream. Many people talk about that. Many festivals talk about that. I remember that in a moment appeared many subtitles in many online, and it was a very. In that moment, there was something very precious. It was a moment with, there was a big opportunity to have a dialogue with another type of audience. For me, like artist, the thing is super important. For me, it's not access. It's not possible. I can accept that my work that is, it's full of bodies. My work is a physical body. I'm sorry, a physical work. I know that it's difficult to think a good translation of that work for other type of sensibilities and access, okay? And I need, not only me, but all the artists need economical research to do that, to study the translation for different type of people. We need time. We need the opportunity of research, maybe in a focus group, maybe in dialogue with people, in dialogue with artists, in dialogue with institutions, okay. And for a moment, I talk. That something of that happened.
Yeah.
And for a moment, I was very enjoy of that. But, repeat, when the world restarted to go, also that it was delayed. And it was very violent because the first talk that I the first idea, the first sensation for me, it was, okay, so you what's in that side, only we are in the moment that we haven't nothing to do.
Yeah, you know, Chiara, that's that is an opportunity lost, because it is a fact that audiences are made of all kind of people.
Yeah.
It is a fact. Like, it's not like if you're disabled, you're not interested in theater, or you don't want to see, to go and see a play. But so there is, on one side, I think it was a lost opportunity, because for just a glimpse of time, we could actually, show that disabled people with disabilities and neurodiversity, and all kinds of chronic illnesses, we are part of the audience. Always, we are. The fact that we don't show up doesn't say anything about us. It says a lot about the kind of spaces that organize those events. So the fact that you never see, or very rarely see, a person in a wheelchair in your space, it doesn't say anything about the interest that person may have in the event. It says a lot about the way that event is built, and so I think it was a lost opportunity, but I hope it's not a completely lost opportunity. To think about accessibility, to think about how we can make our spaces and events more accessible, in order to, to attract an audience that is already there. We don't need to build an audience. Disabled people with disabilities, chronically ill people, they're not, we don't have to attract them, because generally they're not interested in our events. We need to make our spaces accessible, before knowing whether they will come or not to our events, because this is also something that happens a lot, that we make our spaces accessible when we know that someone will access. And you, Chiara, as a disabled artist, you probably know that when you are invited to, to perform somewhere, the venue will be made accessible, for you to be there and perform there. And then when you leave the place, those accessibility, facilities are just, disappear with you, as if you were,
Yeah.
and so on one side, I think that was a lost opportunity to, to think about that. But on the other side, I remember we had a conversation about that, and it was about the fact that it was also an opportunity to think about how we can make valuable representations of people with disability, how we can put them, put us at the center as well of representations. How can we, somehow think about disability not as the leftovers, how can we produce things that are qualitative, valuable, and not just the leftovers, or just a patch that we put, just to make it acceptable. And this brings us, of course, to a bigger issue, which is how we represent disability on stage and outside the stage, how we need to bring disability in all the parts of the process of production, of distribution, of relationship with the audience, and also on the way we actually deal with performers. And so I think that on this side, we have a lot to, to work on, because it is also a big stereotype, I think, that probably, it's a big stereotype, probably also in the artistic environments, that disabled people don't produce, are not productive, or are not qualitative valuable. They don't produce things of quality, of quality. So you go and see a performance by a person with disability, and you will immediately value that person with disability with lower standards because you don't expect much from that person. And so I think it's important to think about this, to think about disabled people as a valuable audience, but also as a valuable part of the whole process, in every side of the process. So I'm sure that about that, as a as a performer, you have a lot to say. So I throw the ball again at you. Tell us something about that.
It's the same thing that when me and Mara, for all the people that are listening now, so when me and Mara make another conversation in Centrality Syndrome in July or June, I don't remember. There was a moment that we started to make many questions to the audience. In that conversation, there was a physical audience with me because Mara is
always here.
Yeah, always. For all your life now, you are that. Yes, absolutely. And it was interesting because in a moment we start to ask to the people that are present why when you see a disabled performer on stage, why do you like him or her? Do you like them? And why you don't like maybe not them, but the way in which them is on the stage. And it's interesting because I think that for every question, for every topic, the important question always is the second. Because the first question is, okay, what do you think about people, the performer with disability on the stage? Okay, but the second question always is the question that try to put a little bomb in your structure. Because the point is, audience, operator, artist, everyone, are you sure that you have the instrument for observe and understand a body with disability when, say, on stage? And are you sure that you have the instrument for understand when a choreographer or performer or director with disability take the decision to stay out of the stage? Are you sure that you can understand really? Because our bodies and our stories is different to the other. And it's important that it's clear that we are another part of the community. And not because we want that, but because it's a fact. And it's important to stay in that fact. And maybe change it, yeah, I hope. But before to change it, it's important that every one of us, every one of the part that is involved in the question, have clear what is the actual situation. For example, people that are listening now, do you think that it's really accessible, the training, the process of formation?
Of education, training, yeah.
For young people that with disability that want to work like dancer, that want to work like choreographer. Are you sure that the big school in Europe are accessible? Are you sure that it's possible for someone with disability decide in a free way what is the way, the street that want to try to go? I think no, but for me it's interesting. Really, it's really interesting that people try to make that question, because that is the first step. Because it's not possible to have an idea about the quality of art of people with disability if we don't start to put the question about the first step, the training, the education.
Yeah, in some way this happens a lot in pretty same way in the access, for example, to academic careers. I mean, it's not by chance that we don't see many artists with disability, going to the upper stages. In the same way that it is not by chance that there are not many teachers with disability or professors at university or researchers, because often it is the first step, as you said, that is inaccessible. And I remember that in one of our conversations, we both defined ourselves as lucky people. Like, I was lucky because, I got sick 11 years ago. And so I was able to do a lot of my life as an able-bodied person. And then when I got sick, I was supported by a family, by friends. I had a lot of opportunities. I'm a lucky person. I was lucky, because I had a strong environment of support. And I remember that you also told me, Chiara, that you felt like you were lucky. You are lucky because you were able to do all of that. And in the common way, we the way that this will be represented is a story of a woman who got, to a certain point in life despite her disability or despite her illness. But the problematic thing is that we think that people can sort of build their life and their happiness despite their disability. And this is because ableism makes us think that disability is always an obstacle. But the real obstacle is not a disability in itself, is the world outside that is not ready, that is not built, that is not accessible for people with disability. And so we are in this, situation in which me and you right now are the lucky persons amongst a lot of others that were not that lucky. And so now we are somehow, in a privileged position, which is weird because, I mean, we always have privileges and forms of oppression that we suffer, but, it's kind of perverse, to be in this position of privilege. And it's so, this issue of what happens at the very first step, as you said, the training, the access to classes, the access. I'm thinking also the access in general to cultural events for a younger person, that can, start to think and maybe, develop a desire to become a performer or a dancer or a choreographer. All of these obstacles at the beginning somehow influence the way a person can actually develop. And then there's the issue of time, the one that we were, discussing at the beginning. Like, someone may have, all the environment around and all the forms of access, but may not have the energies to keep up with the demands of a productive world, which asks you to produce and to do and to, to do interviews and to travel and this and that. So we need to take into consideration all of these pieces. And one of the important questions, I think, besides the ones that you were mentioning, is actually, do you really think it's by chance that you don't see many people with disabilities on stage. Probably this talk that we are having is making clear that the answer is only one, which is no, it's not by chance. But the first step is making this question, is wondering yourself for yourself. Yeah, I don't have a conclusion for this train of thought. Just wanted to,
because there aren't a conclusion.
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah, but I remember you said something that really stuck with me in that talk that we mentioned. It was that we don't want to be lucky people. We want to have the same opportunities as the others, and I think this is very, very important. I don't want to be, I can strip off my privileges if that means that a lot of other people in my condition, can achieve the same. And I think that one of the tricky, contradictory things that happen is that when you are the only person with disability in a place, you suddenly become the speaker's person, the speaker for that category. I don't know if you ever experienced that in your work as a disabled performer and choreographer. Like all of a sudden, you are the only disabled person in the room. And so, you carry the weight of representing the whole category of disability for many.
Yes, and when it happen, always happen. Also for different motivation, but the first is that, okay, if is not present, artists with disability, not because don't exist, but because the big circuit in many occasions is not or not accessible not only in physical way, okay, but in all the type of way that we talk. It's clear that not many time I'm work with other artists with disability, and the bad things for me is what happened is for specific project, and that thing is terrible. Not because I've something, not because I think that specific project for people with disability are wrong. Is not that the point. The point is another. The point is that it's not possible that I can meet all the choreographer with disability, dancer with disability only in diversity festival. Okay. Diversity festival, or I don't know, festival about the idea of limit. And so I involved many people, not white, with disability, with, I don't know, but that are part of different type of minority.
Diversity. Yeah, or diversity, yeah.
And that thing is terrible, and it's terrible because, yeah, that is a part of our identity, but one is not necessary that we identify ourselves in that. Okay, now I'm 36 years old, and I accept to work to take a position like activist, and to make that part of my life, of my identity, is part of my work. I accept that, I think 2 years.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. And I think not because, okay, maybe because before I was more young, maybe yes, but there is a part of me that wants to defend the whole Chiara, because the whole Chiara have other interests. The whole Chiara wanted to talk about other things, and it's super violent that you can to be an artist with disability and don't talk about disabilities. Why? In my past, I have other things that I want to talk. I remember that I talk about with I worked with all the performers. I have other needed. Okay, now I accept that part of my identity. No, I'm sorry. I accept that also in my old when I was more young. But I accept that the part of my identity go in my work, because in my process the two things now are more close, and also because I feel that is necessary now. I don't know, I'm not sure that what is the limit of the two things, but I want to defend that an artist with disability can talk about other things, and it wasn't possible that is a problem, and it wasn't possible that I don't accept that them is invited or also in a festival for about the disability, and maybe have a, I don't know, maybe have a performance about the idea of archive. I don't know. I thought something that is one of the big topic for artists now, and why an artist that talk about the archive need to go in a festival about limit. For me, it haven't a sense. And so, for to go in to your question, yeah, many all the time I'm not all the time, but in many occasions, I am the only artist with disability in a room in a festival, and in many occasions, I receive many requests to take to prendere parola.
Yeah, to speak about yeah,
to speak about that. And yes, now I decide that it's part of my work and my life, and it's okay. But in my past, sometimes for me it was violent, because maybe it wasn't a good moment for me. Maybe I wanted to do that. Maybe I'm in a different point of my work and my life and my reflection, and it was violent because it's like to tell me, I'm not interested in your work and in your poetic, but only in your physical, only in your bodies. And wow, and it's super,
yeah,
it's so strong. Now in Italy, we are starting to change something about that, but because during the pandemic, a group of artists with disability and me are part of that group, decided to start to have a dialogue and to become an association called Aldiqua Artists, Alternative Disability Equality Artists. And we started to impose our presence. Okay, so it's not real that there is only one artist with disability in Italy. We are many, and if you want to have a dialogue about that, remember that many people are present, and now we know that we are a small part of artists with disability, because we know that in Italy there are many artists with disability, and many young artists that are involved in educational process. And so maybe it's important to start to open the gaze, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, we are many.
I think that this is a beautiful conclusion, no, for our conversation. I think our time is almost up, and I think it's important what you said. You know, we are many,
Yeah.
and we are very different and very diverse, and so to look at disability also as a potential, a potentiality to grow also for the artistic quality of what is produced. I think, yeah, I will leave it here for my side, and thank again the audience.
So
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. And thank you, Tansi and August. And thank you, the people that watched that video. Yes. And sorry for my English. I always close my dialogue with that. Sorry for my English. I know that is terrible. Okay. I know.
Bye.
So